Thank you for tuning into our podcast, and we are coming to you from Holyoke, Massachusetts. I am your host, Carrie, and joining me is our Holyoke's very own local historian and founder of the Historical Tours of Greater Holyoke, in which he offers both public and private tours, as well as presentations of the local canal systems, reservoirs, and cemeteries, as well as various parks and streets in Holyoke, South Hadley, and Chicopee, Massachusetts. Now, you actually lead these tours and presentations yourself, is that correct?
That's right, and the heritage ones that will be coming up are definitely self-made. They're not sanctioned by the community or the government, so I just have my own idea with it.
That's awesome. And so today you're going to be telling us about that, right? The South Hadley Heritage Trail. So now the South Hadley Heritage Trail is a historical landmark trail that you designed, and I can list out some of the stops along the trail that include Riverside Park, the Old Firehouse Museum, the Falls Congregational Church, and the Bachelor Brook Conservation Area. Now, why did you design this trail?
Because I believe every community in Massachusetts should have the equivalent of the Freedom Trail that Boston has. Boston's Freedom Trail connects 16 points that are connected with the Freedom Initiative of the United States in 1770s. And they connected them in such a way that you only have to walk 4 miles to cover them all. And they do say you don't have to cover them all in one day. I did the Freedom Trail in the 1980s, and sure, it took me a couple hours on one Saturday, a couple hours the next Saturday, a couple hours next Saturday. And I did it, and I liked doing it. I lived in Boston at that point, so I was able to cover a lot of ground there. And so I used that idea to build up equivalent for the communities that I've been given tours around. And so in South Hadley, I thought that they deserved their trail. Now, I didn't do it through the initiative of the government or through any other institution, so I just did it on my own. And I made a pamphlet with a map and with points on it that people can follow.
Now, so what are some of the ways that an individual or group can approach the trail?
All right, so you can bring your tablet or your handheld device, specifically your cell phone, and you can follow along. You can do it in the car. You can do it on your bike if you're a good bicycle rider. You can do parts on walking, do some on one side, some on the next side, and so forth. You can approach it that way. Or you can do it all in one day and see what happens. And you can go on your own, or you can go, of course, with a group or an institution. I'm not going to give a set tour over it because it's so vast in South Hadley. Sure, there's 16 stops like the Freedom Trail, but it's more than 4 miles. And that's because South Hadley and South Hadley Falls, two distinct neighborhoods, grew up differently. And so you have to get to the very northern part of South Hadley for some stops and the very southern part of South Hadley for other stops. And for instance, the top of the Summit House on Skinner Mountain is one point, and then the Vietnam Veteran Bridge another, and they're separated by about 7 miles alone. All right, so you can design it. I have my own design on my pamphlet. You can also use my webpage to go through it, and you don't have to follow the order. There's no reason to.
Okay, now, and so quickly before we continue with the rest of our interview, just to fill in our listeners, if you want to find out more information or want to sign up for any of his various tours, you can check out his website at holyokecanaltour.org. There he has both videos of the various stops along each tour, also past and present photos of the historical sites throughout as well. And if you're interested in setting up private tours, you can email him directly at bobcat4214B@yahoo.com. And they are perfect for fun and educational outdoor activities for the whole family or for your group parties, especially for special occasions and get-togethers. And they are also good for just an outdoors, getting outdoors for the day. Excuse me. Getting back to our interview now. I can list a couple of the other stops along the trail, which are the First Congregational Church, the Gaylord Memorial Library, South Hadley Village Cemetery, and the Vietnam Veterans Bridge. Now, so what are some of your favorite stops and why?
All right, some of my favorite stops are, of course, I like the top of Mount Holyoke Range, so I like Skinner House and Skinner Mountain. I used to go there as a boy. I was probably only 15 years old when I took my bicycle from my home in South Hadley, traveled on my bike about 6 miles, and that's just to get to the base of the mountain, then travel up the mountain, came down, which is always dangerous on a bike, and then went back home. So I loved bicycle riding. I loved it up there. And whenever relatives visit, I always say, "You want to go up there?" Sure. Of course, that's my favorite place. But other places that are great fun, they're all great fun, but I'm the kind of person that likes to go out in nature and walk around. So the Bachelor Brook Conservation Area, made only 3 years ago, is also great fun. It connects Ferry Street on the southern portion to Route 47, and total walking around, if you do the whole thing, could be up to 3 miles long.
Okay, now, why is the Vietnam Veterans Bridge a stop on this tour, by the way?
Well, I have 2 heritage trails at this point in the year 2023, and one's in Holyoke and one's in South Hadley. And by having the Vietnam Veterans Bridge, which is only 32 years old, be one of the stops, it's a way of connecting the 2 different heritage trails. But another very good reason is when you're looking west from that bridge, you get to see the Holyoke Dam. And the Holyoke Dam is half in South Hadley and half in Holyoke. You also get to see the Connecticut River. And again, half in South Hadley and half in Holyoke. So these connections are great, and you get to see probably the second best view in South Hadley. Sure, the best view is on the top of the mountain range, but the second best view is along that Connecticut River.
Okay, so now thank you, Robert, for educating us on the tour, and we want to thank our listeners for tuning in. And you can also find more of his podcast and much more on his website at holyokecanaltour.org. And again, you can also email him directly to set up private tours or to inquire about any other subjects at bobcat4214, capital B, at yahoo.com. And be sure to keep an eye out for his upcoming tour. Thank you for tuning into our podcast. We are coming to you from Chicopee, Massachusetts. I am your host, Carrie, and joining me is Holyoke's very own local historian and creator of the historical tours of Greater Holyoke, Robert Camoon. He offers both public and private tours, as well as presentations of the local canal systems, reservoirs, cemeteries, and churches, as well as various parks and streets in Holyoke, South Hadley, and Chicopee, Mass. Now you actually lead these tours and give these presentations yourself, is that correct?
That's right, and I love doing South Hadley because I live there.
And so today he will be educating us on the South Hadley tours and presentations. So why did you start doing South Hadley tours and presentations?
Oh, right. So South Hadley has been my home base for about 2/3 of my life, so I know it well and I like it a lot, and I like being in the area that I live in. Like I started with a cemetery tour, and it was only half a mile from my house. So how convenient was that? I would get to walk to a tour I was given. Very few people can say that. So, why did I start doing Sally tours and presentations? Sure, I'll answer that. But also, I'm going to tell you a lot of the things I progressed through, and also how people have appreciated them and what the future holds. Now, I almost always start with cemetery tours within a given community. So Holyoke, South Hadley, and Chicopee, I start with that. The reason why is because you get to know the people that are associated with it. Now, half the people buried in South Hadley come from Holyoke, but this was a great way to get both South Hadley and Holyoke information into my head. Now, also I progress on to churches because they form the nucleus of almost every community, and that could be true of the very old church, but also true of a modern church might be based around a car, arriving there in your car, but at least it's based around something. And also, you'll have to look at the other topics I give, and the other topics I give include parks. So if there's a park around you, I want to be able to explain it as much as possible. And so these really develop a core of understanding. Now, the most important is this last one. The canals in a town or city are really the industrial fire engine for that town or city. And so in Chicopee, it's 2 canals. In Holyoke, it's 3 canals. In South Hadley, it's 2 canals. Are very important to explain. And so I always start with a canal-based tour to get really into the community, and people love that.
And what topics did you start with within South Hadley?
Okay, my first tour in South Hadley was the Precious Blood Cemetery tour, and that is on Willamette Street in South Hadley, and there's so many wonderful old stones. That's a cemetery from 1875, and there they find a memorial to the Precious Blood Church fire of 1875, where 70 people died, and of those 70 people, about 52 are buried in South Hadley at the Precious Blood Cemetery. So that was one great start. Of course, the canal, Sally Canal for navigation, was another one. Is Riverside Park, right below the Sally Library, which is the start of the Sally Canal. So I got to explain the lock systems. I got to explain why the canal and when the canal was made, and where you can still see it come up above the surface. Most of it's gone, but there's places where it still exists. And I develop always as much as possible into other topics, and we'll see those later.
And so quickly, before we continue with the rest of our interview, just to fill our listeners in, if you want to find out more information or sign up for any of his various tours, you can check out his website at holyokecanaltour.org. In there, he has both videos of the various stops along each tour and also past and present photos of the historical sites throughout as well. And if you're interested in setting up a private tour, you can email him directly at bobcat4214, and they are perfect for fun and educational outdoor activities for the whole family or for your group parties, especially special occasions and get-togethers. So getting back to our interview, how have the tours and presentations been received?
Okay. In South Hadley, I do, on the average, one presentation per year. Like, about 5 years ago, I did a presentation on the cemeteries of South Hadley and Holyoke, and I gave it at the South Hadley Library and at the Holyoke Library. And it was very well received in both places, because no one has ever done this before. And I explained the reason for the origin of that cemetery, where the oldest burials were, and so forth. And also, I do presentations, not on the cemeteries, but the year coming up, I hope to do one on the 6 navigational canals of Connecticut River. They were built starting from 1795 up to the 1830s, and they were built to help ships and boats get from Long Island Sound up as far as possible to Connecticut River. So again, very few people do these kind of discussions and presentations, so I do them. Now, the tours themselves have been real well received, especially the canal one. The cemetery ones less so, the reason being that fewer people are really interested in cemeteries. Protestant ones are more popular than the Catholic ones or the Jewish ones. And so far so good, and I hope to develop some more in the future, and I'll tell you about those.
And so, what will the future hold for tours and presentations in this town?
Okay, so like in Holyoke, I'm going to develop South Hadley up even further. I've done more in Holyoke, but I've done both as long as each other. They both started for me 9 years ago. And I'm going to keep developing South Hadley as much as I can. And that will include not only the 3 C's, churches, cemeteries, and canals, but also parks and streets, reservoirs, and specific homes. So I did last year, into year 2022, a specific home in Holyoke, and I've done that in Holyoke also. The home was 5 Walnut Street in South Hadley, and I developed it around the Scott family, around the photography they had done, and it was contributed to the South Hadley Library and digitized, and it was just sitting there, both physically and digitally, and I developed a genealogy for the family, learned about his family history in the house, and talked to the family that lives there now and went around their house, and it really developed into something people liked. Now, street tours around Hadley, they're less worthwhile than the ones in Holyoke, because Holyoke is really based on a grid system, and so the streets that are most important in Hadley tend to be highways, and so I don't want to be on there. But there are some streets I want to do, like Woodbridge Street, for instance, College Street, so forth. Reservoirs, I do 2 reservoir tours in Holyoke, and I want to do one in South Hadley someday, maybe around the Lithia Springs Reservoir. But there's many other reservoirs. A lot of the conservation lands around South Hadley are with reservoirs. So I could do one around the Leaping Wells Reservoir, or the reservoirs that are in the Black Stevens Conservation Land. So there's always things to develop, and I hope to get it up to a very high level.
So thank you, Robert, for educating us on your tours. And we want to thank our listeners for tuning in. And you can also tune into a large selection of our other podcasts and much more at his website. Again, that's hoyokecanaltour.org. And again, you can email him directly for private tours or to inquire about anything else at bobcat4214, capital B, at yahoo.com. And be sure to keep an eye out for his upcoming 2024 season tours and more as they become available. Thank you for tuning in.